Welcome everyone back to the Resilient Minds podcast. I'm really excited. We got Felix Brooks Church today on the Resilient Minds podcast. Welcome, my friend. Where are you coming in from today?
Hey, good morning. It's morning here, actually, here in Sydney. I think I'm a day ahead of you in the future. So great to
Yeah.
talk to you today.
Yeah, likewise, Felix. And for those that really don't know you, I just want to share a little bit about your magic, your wisdom, and what you're up to. So, Felix really believes that nutrition is a basic human right. He's a co-founder and CEO at Sanku. He's social and entrepreneur, inventor, speaker, Mulago fellow, and Rolex laureate. So you've lived across the world, 6 developing countries, experiencing diverse cultures and seeing the difference that access to good nutrition has on different families. While that, he's surveyed hundreds of meals in at-risk communities across South Asia, East and South Africa. You've really taken the time, Felix, to refine fortification technologies and develop economic models for sustaining rural fortification, which is fascinating. And you lead the overall organizational development, mission, and trajectory of Sanku. So I'm looking forward to hear all about the aspects of the product development, the engineering, for what you've built with regards to the Sanku Dosifier and how it can really serve and support food, education fundamentally as well, and what we can do inside of the different industries. So I look forward to learning more about this, brother, and the magic that you're bringing to the world.
Great. Excited to talk about what we do and the journey of how we got here and where we're going.
I love it, man. I think that that's the biggest thing is I find that everything that we do is for a greater purpose, and I can sense that yourself, that you're really focused on going a route that is carving a path and paving its own way for something greater than yourself. So I'm curious to know, because on the Resilient Minds podcast, I'm like, we're always discovering things with different entrepreneurs, leaders that have cultivated their mission, that have created their devotion by experiencing something. And it's a common paradigm theme where people are, at least from my observation, the more that they're following their purpose, the more that they're discovering a path of relentless resilience and discovering their true nature. So I'd love for you to take us back to kind of like your experiences and what led you to finding the why of what you're doing now and where you're headed.
Yeah, great. I have a co-founder, David Dotson, and we both had a journey that got us here to discover each other and to ultimately work together to combat this massive problem called malnutrition, also known as hidden hunger. And so what hidden hunger is in the areas that we work, currently targeting countries throughout East Africa, um, bellies are full. People aren't necessarily starving, but they are starving from lack of nutrients. So full bellies aren't enough. If you only eat a primarily starchy diet and don't have that, so to speak, colorful things on your plate, you will suffer from malnutrition. And for kids, especially in those first 1,000 days and women of reproductive age, this has huge effects on their health, on their future, even causes death. So it was a massive problem that we both identified early on meaning 10 to 20 years ago. And we had our different origin stories. Mine started in Cambodia, Dave started in Central America, but we both identified that number one, access to nutritious food should be a basic human right. Unfortunately, close to 2 billion people globally don't have that basic human right. They suffer from malnutrition. So massive problem, but there is a simple solution, and it's called food fortification, literally making food stronger by adding key nutrients like vitamin A, folic acid, B12, zinc, iron, you name it. This is common practice in what we call the global north, in the US and North America, Europe, and Australia, where I am now. So staple foods, things like sugar, edible oil, flour, salt, the things that you cook essentially every meal with, they're great vehicles to get nutrients into people, because the chances that people are eating those key staple foods, and a lot of them every day consistently, is very high. So this proven science of getting nutrients into people, improving health outcomes, we are bringing down to the most at-risk communities in East Africa. And so I discovered malnutrition, or rather the effects of malnutrition, when I was volunteering in Cambodia. This is going back to, well, 2006. I was a lot younger then, and I was volunteering, in this community in Cambodia, helping street kids. And obviously, that's a very vulnerable population. They don't have good diets. Kids were physically stunted. They're a lot shorter. They looked a lot younger than they actually were. Infections would turn into big issues for them because they had weak immune systems. Anyways, all of this, I realized that getting to a child, essentially our project got to them too late. I wanted to get into prevention. Similar circumstance in Central America, where if we got the children, again, those first 1,000 days of their life, we could have huge health outcomes and improvements for these populations. So again, that's where we discovered the problem. That's where we discovered that food fortification was very cost effective. And our paths kind of merged some years later, to work together, ultimately to found this project and now this company called Sanku. And I can get into more details around that, but that was the origin, identifying the problem, caring about it, and again, trying to bring a basic human right to millions of people.
It's interesting, and I can't wait to learn a little bit more about Sanku. But before we go there, and talking about stunted growth and development around food and malnutrition, like I'm listening, and I love how you say full belly is not enough, and it's interesting because I'm seeing that still, even in U.S., Canada, even when I was in Australia or Europe, it's still interesting because like a lot of people are not actually paying enough attention as well to this type of green organic foods that you're talking about. So it's a common theme, even though we think that it's we have all this abundance here as well. We're not actually paying enough attention either to some of the stuff that we're putting on our plate. And so it's just a fascinating concept or realization that I'm having right now. I was just at Life and Wealth at in Fiji, one of Tony Robbins' event, and he discusses a lot about having green food on our plate. And so it's
Right.
fascinating that we're not really paying that as much attention. I remember growing up as a boy, is like, hey, if you don't have meat on your plate, it's not really a real meal. Like these are some of
Right.
the things that I've learned in the past. And so do you find that full belly mentality that is not enough is a common theme also in the US? Or is this just my hallucination of what I'm seeing? I'd love to get your opinion or perspective.
I think it absolutely is. Here's the thing. There's three things that keep people from eating healthy. And whether you're in the US, in a town, in some state, or you're in East Africa, there's three things. So cost is a barrier, access is a barrier, and behavior is a barrier. And so, healthy no matter where you are, right? To get those greens shipped in, to get fresh veg and fruits and things like that, there is a cost to eating healthy. There's also a barrier. Not all areas or communities to healthy food. There's not fresh produce in some communities, whether you're in some town in the US or some town in East Africa. And then to your point, there's also behavior, knowledge that eating certain things are better for you and eating other things might not be good for you. So those three factors, I think, are kind of across the board in every community, every country, issues, barriers keeping people from eating healthy and ultimately being healthy. Now, where we work in East Africa, those three barriers exist. And our organizations is trying to address those three barriers very cost effectively and building scalable models to actually reach millions of people addressing those three barriers. So the first one is access. We know that whether you're in the rural community or in the urban setting, you might not always have access to healthy food. And that's why they eat what's abundantly available in front of them, which is flour. And it's more specifically maize flour or corn flour. It's grown everywhere in East Africa. It's super cheap. You eat it, you feel full, it fills your belly. You got your carbs and your starch. People are workers, you got your energy. But again, it's pretty much dead of any intrinsic nutritional value. And so if that's all you're eating, yes, you've got your energy, you got your carbs, but you don't have your nutrients. And then you don't have a weak immune system. And then you can't think and concentrate and you can't fight disease. You name it, it's just a knock-on effect. So that's the access issue. But the cost also, there might be, to ship in veg to cities and to have it throughout the entire season, because veg and fruit are seasonal. You might not be able to afford it as well. And the majority of people are living on less than $1 a day in these communities. Think about that. And so, maybe they have to make a tough choice. Do I eat healthy today or do I send my daughter to school? These are tough decisions for people, again, living under $1 a day. And then there's behavior. People just think, okay, maybe this is what I've always eaten, starchy diet. I don't really understand about the greens. I don't want the greens. So these are all individual challenges, but collectively, it's what's driving malnutrition. So what we're trying to do is to make healthy food, nutritious food available, neutralize the cost so it's affordable, and make it cool to be healthy, to eat healthy, for people to understand what nutrients do to their body, why them and their children should eat them as well. So that's kind of our mission, is to address those three areas and really scale that nutrition intervention.
It's amazing. I actually love how you break it down to the three components, and that's, I imagine, why uh, you're capable of scaling so quickly. So, I mean, I imagine I know it's not been like a quick venture. However, the devotion that you've created to bringing the economic modeling to that emphasis of cost, access, and behavior, and then being able to share that with your co-founder and your investors and the stakeholders at large is probably a great way that allows them to see the devotion to the way that you're able to contribute your efforts. So I'm curious now with Sanku and the development, what is it that, in terms of the food fortification and what you're doing specifically to really bring this cost, access, and behavior to where your location is, and what are some of the problems that you're noticing of allowing that expansion to continue to grow, and the solutions that you're creating to fulfill them?
Sure, and I'll go back to kind of the beginning. So
Please.
David Dotson, my co-founder, and his former wife, Stephanie Dotson, they co-founded a NGO, a nonprofit charity. This is going back 20 years ago, called Project Healthy Children, right? Very direct, very clear who they're trying to help. And the mission was to engage with governments in Africa to convince them that malnutrition is a solvable problem and food fortification is that, and that they should pass laws like you have in the US, where big food companies there should be a mandate that those big food companies must add nutrients to the staple foods they're producing. Again, edible oil, add vitamin A, salt, add iodine, sugar, vitamin A, flour, zinc, iron, you name it. And so that was successful, and they did that for about 10 years, working with, I believe it was about 7 countries throughout East Africa. Again, the government would pass the law, they would ideally start enforcing these large industries to produce healthy food. Then what David recognized, he was in Rwanda driving through the countryside, was no matter how successful that program was to get governments to pass the law and large industries to fortify and add nutrients to food, there's massive amount of populations throughout East Africa that don't eat centrally processed foods, that don't have a supermarket in their community, where big industrially produced foods don't reach. These people eat locally. The food is grown locally. It's milled into flour in the case of maize, and they consume it locally. So what about them? And what about those most at-risk communities? And we're talking about close to 1 billion people don't have access to essentially processed foods. And so that's when he put out a job opportunity to develop a program to address what's called small scale fortification or rural village level fortification. I was hired, I worked with David to develop a machine. You see it sitting in the back of me if you're watching this video, and a business model to support that machine. And what this machine does, it attaches onto this small rural village level mill, the mill that grinds up grain and produces flour. Every village might have one of these mills, every town might have a dozen, every city might have 100. But collectively, these small mills feed literally entire nations. So we thought, wow, if we could build this machine, automate the addition of nutrients into the flour source at all these nations, we're going to reach hundreds of millions of people and potentially save millions of lives. So the first step and the first aha moment was build a machine, attach it to the flour source, the food source in the village, reach some people. That worked. After a few years, we thought, well, let's make this into a company. We founded Sanku as a social enterprise. Social enterprise essentially means a nonprofit business doing good, right? Our metric is driven by social impact, not necessarily profitability. So we started to scale, we started to grow this company, hire some staff, boots on the ground in Tanzania. This is a country where close to 130 children die every single day from malnutrition. So from a social standpoint, an opportunity to have huge impact. And we scaled, this is going back to about 2017, after working in for a few years. I think we had about 100 mills at that point. And we're trying to sell these nutrients to these millers. We give them a machine to do the job, and then the recurring input we try to sell, that this powdered nutrients. Think of like a daily multivitamin that you should take. Crush that up into powder, put it into your food. You have iron, zinc, folic acid, B12, you name it. All the really good things for our body. We're bringing that, again, that proven science down to the rural African village. So now these millers can't afford these nutrients. Again, they're really small businesses. They're selling to a community that's living on less than $1 a day. They can't absorb it. So we thought, this isn't scalable the way we're operating. So we, again, one of those barriers, like I said, eating healthy is cost. We've just introduced a cost barrier, and that's kind of working backwards to our mission. So we thought, how can we neutralize the cost of fortified, nutritious food, but in a sustainable manner? So we thought, okay, business 101, we can't sell to a customer a product that he doesn't value or can't afford, which is the nutrients. But what else is that miller, that small food producer, already purchasing to run their business? Well, they're purchasing empty bags to pack their flour to sell a commercial branded package into the market. So we aggregated all our millers, again, about 100 millers at that time, and went directly to the wholesaler of these empty bags. We bought them in bulk. We saw some volume economics. We were able to reduce the cost of these bags by about 25%. That represented the actual cost of the nutrients as well. So now we're selling empty flour bags plus nutrients to millers at the same price point that he was previously buying just for the empty flour bags, essentially neutralizing the cost of fortification. And the biggest outcome of that is that miller can now sell a nutritious premium fortified product to mothers at the same cost as an inferior unfortified product, meaning we don't have to rely on any behavioral change. That's the third barrier, remember, the behavior. We don't have to convince 20, 30 million mothers to pay more for something that they might not understand. And that's when we really shot up in scale, from reaching a couple 100,000 people to today reaching close to 10 million people with nutritious food every single day.
Brother, I am very fascinated by your ability to really bring this to life and to see a bigger picture. And I'm hearing something that's very consistent, and it's mothers. Like, why do you feel like there's such a shift, or why is it so much more important to serve the mothers? Why aren't there more fathers paying attention to this type of stuff? Like, what's going on? I just think that I'm hearing, that nature of the feminine energy of paying attention to these things. And I'm curious your take on this.
Yeah, we're producing fortified nutritious food for the entire population. So men and adult men are not excluded. But where we feel we have the biggest opportunity to make the biggest difference is with mothers and with children, specifically children within the first 1,000 days of their life, and specifically with mothers of reproductive age. Essentially getting to mothers before they're mothers, right? Not only are they healthy, but the children they produce are healthier as well. But also, as a kid, everybody's first doctor was your mother, right? They're the ones that knew what was best for you, what to feed you. They knew when you were sick and what medicine to give you. Their care factor, the reality is that their care factor is beyond anybody else's. They're the one who loves you most from a health standpoint. They are your first doctor. And in these communities and many communities, women do the shopping. They buy the food, they cook the food, they serve this food to their kids. And so it's so important that we're enabling mothers to be health heroes and to continue to be those first doctors for their children. And for us, that is the path to ending malnutrition, is getting better food to mothers who get better food to the tables of their children, to the plates of their children, and care for their children until their children are old enough to care for themselves. So for us, that's super important that we provide that basic human right and that access now. Remember the other barrier, we provide the access to affordable, nutritious food to the people who are most important in these communities.
I love it, bro. I love that you're so conscious of the fact of in the place that you are in service of, and it's like it's a really a deeper space of curiosity, a deeper space of mission oriented awareness. And I imagine that I mean, for me, my mom and dad have been there for me, and my mom has always been very supportive in multiple different ways, and especially the food, like you say, like always taking care of the food, and wanting to like make sure there's a lot of food available. And so uh, it's interesting. It's such a feminine virtue, and it's possible for. I just want to acknowledge, because I also think that is also the part of you that is serving at that level. And it's fascinating and beautiful and super important, because I do believe that the more that we're cultivating as men the safe space for our feminine counterparts, the more that then we can actually say support and acknowledge the benefit of what the children also need. So it's a beautiful interconnection and a beautiful awareness to really bring this to life. And so now, and then also the way that the children are able to then feel this nurturing, being supportive. So where now are you kind of creating even more of this awareness? Where do you need support on? What are some of the things that you're running into to expand and grow and create more of these behaviors on the ground?
Mhm. We are definitely expanding. We started off in Tanzania, and now we have over 1,000 small mills dotted throughout towns and villages and even cities. Again, in Tanzania, feeding, I think, close to 6 million people just in that country alone. And we have about 100 staff. And again, we're the boots on the ground. We're on the front lines of fortification. We're visiting these mills. We have vehicles driving throughout. And we're scaling rapidly, not only adding more staff, adding more mills, reaching more people, but also the infrastructure of how we own the supply chain and these products to get to these millers. We used to buy them offshore, nutrients from Germany, flour bags from China. We now produce our own flour bags. We built a factory to make these empty flour bags that we sell to millers. We just built a factory that now produces these actual nutrients, the powdered vitamin and mineral nutrients that we add to the flour. All of these things we're doing with the conscious effort to think, yes, we want to get really big. We want to reach 100 million people by 2030, which is the big goal, but we want to sustain that. We want to have our cost per person every year drop. Right now, we're extremely cost effective because of the streamlined operations and organizational chart that we have, because we've reduced the cost of the goods that we sell, these flour bags and these nutrients, and have really built efficiencies in the machines. Our cost per person, it costs for the same cup of the cost of a cup of coffee. We can fortify or add the nutrients to the food for an entire year for one family. Think about that. One cup of coffee, one family, the basic human right of better nutrition for an entire year. We want to bring that cost all the way down to break even one day. So we're not dependent on philanthropy, on donors. That it could be market-based. The things that we sell to these millers very cost effectively are able to sustain our operations. So we're thinking in that spirit to scale and to sustain that. We're continuing to looking to grow and looking to move to other markets and areas where we can have bigger impact. We're literally in the final stages of launching a new program in Ethiopia. Ethiopia is just north of Kenya, so we're kind of moving up throughout East Africa. It's a massive country with a massive food issue. It's about 129 million people live in Ethiopia, so very, very big country. A country where 740 kids die every single day from malnutrition, meaning they have weak immune systems, they can't fight disease and illness, and they die from very preventable things. If they only had better nutrition, that wouldn't happen. And so we have the opportunity, the government invited us, which is important. We're moving in a couple weeks. Hopefully we'll have a scaled program, starting to scale rather in 2025 to reach about 40 million people, work with about 400 mills to reach 40 million people. So stay tuned on that. We're all super excited because, again, from a mission standpoint, we have such an opportunity for positive impact to literally save lives and get us one step closer to our ultimate goal of reaching 100 million people by 2030.
Brother, like Ethiopia, Tanzania, I'm certain you'll go through a lot of others as well. Tell me, like, why you're so driven to make this happen.
For me, what gets me out of bed is this is a critical and urgent matter. Malnutrition affects, again, 2 billion people every single day. And the outcome of that, or the negative effect of that, is that 8,000 children globally die every single day. 8,000 every day, right? And so think about literally throughout the day, there's a clock in my mind ticking, like we're not getting there fast enough. We need to scale. We need to be addicted to scale, sustain scale, but we need to step on the gas. There are so many areas and communities that need our help, and governments that we can help and work with to scale adding nutrients to food as a basic human right. And every day that passes, that horrible 8,000 figure in my head passes. So that's what drives me from a mission standpoint, is that we have to be at scale yesterday, right? And so I'm really pushing through. We do rely on donations and philanthropy to get us to a point of scale that we can sustain ourselves. But we need that support to scale faster. So it's an urgent and critical thing we're working on. I spend half my time running operations in East Africa and the other half speaking to donors, trying to get them to support us. Again, the cost of a cup of coffee will get one family fortified for an entire year. So from a kind of a cost effectiveness standpoint, it's a no-brainer. It's just I can't speak to enough people in one day to tell them about this. So I'm so happy for this opportunity to speak to you, to hopefully get to a wider audience, to say, first of all, this is a problem. If you didn't know about it, now you do. And it's a solvable problem that doesn't take a lot of money to reach a lot of people and literally save lives.
And I'm curious about your experience to speaking to donors and getting people to help you in terms of the growth and development of getting this more awareness. do you what do you feel like it's been difficult to get people to get involved? And if so, why? And why don't you think more people are involved in paying more attention to the fact that there's children dying all the time? Is it like I'm not going to pay attention to it, so it's not on my mind, or is it like people are just they don't think it's their problem? Like, what's kind of your experience? Because I have my own theories, but like I'd love to hear your perspective here.
I think one of the biggest issues we're facing today is individualism. And that could be driven by social media. It's just the era we live in. People are very insular. They live in their phones, they live in their little bubble. And you see so much on the news that you become immune to it, right? Oh, another devastating day in Gaza. Oh, Ukraine war. Oh, that was yesterday's news. Ethiopia. Well, I can't even find that on the map. Who cares? People live in their bubble and they care about, their house and then maybe their neighbors and maybe their community, but their care factor starts to dwindle almost the further geographically they get away from their epicenter, right? And there is a great modern day philosopher called Peter Singer. He's the founder of an organization called The Life You Can Save. And he had a really good thought exercise. He said, let's say you're wearing a $2,000 suit with $500 pair of shoes, and you're walking down the road past a lake and you see a child drowning. What are you going to do if you don't have time to take off your clothes? What are you going to do? You're going to say, no, this what I'm wearing, $2,000, I don't want to damage it. Or are you just going to, without thinking, you're going to jump in that water, save that child's life despite ruining your $2,000 suit? Okay, but what if you could also send $2,000 to a far off place that you can't even find on the map that's also going to do the same thing? What's the difference? Just because you see it and it's really close to you, does that make that life more valuable? Right? And so again, I think the further people exist geographically and the further outside of the community that you identify to, or the people that might have your color skin or look like you and think like you, their life for some reason becomes less important. And that's the sad aspect, that we're sitting on this little blue planet all together, yet we couldn't be further apart at times. And so I think that's really what's driving people to be less involved, have a less care factor, and ultimately it makes our job a lot harder trying to convince people that these lives matter.
Do you think that this is something that has been done intentionally? I'm curious. Or do you think that like we're come here to really create a more bigger awareness? Because I imagine, and I'll speak for myself. I feel like when I was a kid, I was able to have all these dreams, and then society says, media, all these things start focusing on all the things that are disingenuous or focusing on all the fear and really making you feel small, that I almost went into that bubble. And then my inner self was like, hold on a second, something's not right. It doesn't feel good. So I got
Yeah.
more curious. But do you think that this is, yeah, I mean, I'd love to get your opinion.
Yeah, I'm a believer in not believing the hype, right? And you can get caught up in, especially with social media. Listen, it's scrolling, it's such an addiction. I catch myself sometimes too. And I'm more aware of it now because I have kids. My son Leo is 6, my daughter Yaya is 5, and I can see how addictive potentially they could fall into that trap of just being on their phones. And we really have to be cognitive to limit their screen time. But if you're not really doing that as a parent, I think we have a whole generation that is going to grow up believing the hype, right? And that's dangerous because then they're not free thinkers. And if you're not a free thinker, you can't think about people other than yourself, right? You're just self-absorbed living in a bubble in an insular state. So ultimately I'm an optimistic, but man, things aren't looking good, and I really hope it doesn't play out in the worst way. And I hope there's some sort of a lightning to move away from where we're at right now, because I do think we're at a crossroads. A lot of terrible things are going on in the world. And a lot of that can be mitigated or changed if people got more involved and there was a switch in the mindset as well, from us and us versus them to just it's us. That's it. There's
Yeah.
us. No one's going to
Yeah.
solve this. No one's going to come save us. We are going to do this. And so I'm hoping that the more people I speak to have that thought process, or at least start to develop that with them. I don't know. I'm not in any position to change the world, but I can at least, have a conversation with you or somebody on a daily basis.
Well, I believe that you are in a major position to lead the way, brother, because you've been an example of really stepping into taking the road less traveled, even though people can project onto you, their own limitations. You've decided to focus on what you're capable of doing and doing it. And I believe, bro, that you are definitely being an example of what's possible and changing the world in a better way by doing rather than talking about it, which is also super important because there's so many people out there that are just talking, and they're not integrating or making it happen. And so this is something that I believe is super fundamental, because ultimately it's our behaviors and our actions that speak way more than anything that any of us can say. So, acknowledgments to you, my friend, and genuine amazement in what you're achieving and continuing to do.
No, thank you. I mean, I, I have a good friend, Charlie. He runs the Life You Can Save, Charlie Bresler, and he has a great line. He says, "You don't have to be. You can save lives without being super brave. If you donate, if you give to a charity, whether they're working in education or gender equality, you don't have to be out there on the front lines fighting that fight. You can donate to them. So you can literally be a superhero without being super brave, because it's
Yeah.
scary to do that, to commit your life. I am completely reasonable that not everybody wants to give their life towards being a massive change maker. It's not for everybody, but that doesn't mean everybody can't participate, right? And it's supporting, whether it's a local food bank in your community or some project halfway around the world. It doesn't matter. Just do something. Just do something, right? And that's inaction is the biggest issue right now. Individualism is the biggest issue. So hopefully, every day somebody can make a little bit more action in their life, whether it's in your home, your greater community, or again, halfway around the world. Doesn't matter what it is, but just do something.
Inaction is also action, and I think that it's like that ability to actually not speak or not share or not get curious is also like something that takes away the responsibility of our lives. And so, um, bro, I'm curious about fundamentally, like, knowing, you have kids, you're looking at, the bigger picture. Uh, what do you want to kind of like leave behind? Because you're building a legacy, but how do you see the future kind of unfold as we continue to grow with AI and technology and all these things? How is that going to affect uh, Africa? You know, and do you believe that with actually let's I'm just going to leave it at that for now. Like, what do you see as the future kind of continues to unpack itself?
Well, I'll answer that with what I hope I can influence or instill in my children. Again, Leo is only 6 and Yaya is only 5. So they're just little people and there's a big world ahead of them, and potentially a scary world. And what I hope that I can do as a parent or a teacher or a mentor in any way in their life is instill confidence that they can do and influence good. Being a good person requires confidence, because sometimes you have to make somebody feel uncomfortable because there's a situation that's unjust. There's a system that's not working, and you have to be disruptive. Being good is not an easy path, right? You gotta navigate some tricky situations, but to have that confidence that your moral compass, you can trust that, and that you're going to walk that path, it does take confidence. So I think it comes down to that I can instill with them, first of all, what is right and wrong, and for them to decide and what those moral parameters are. And again, to be confident to back that up. And I think if that as just, if anything, that as a foundation, I think they stand a good chance of making at least their life a positive environment and hopefully affect others as well. And hopefully that can be contagious, right? I think I grew up in a generation where in high school, being cool, doing certain things back then were cool, but aren't very cool right now, looking back. Certain behaviors or mentality. And I think there's a shift, and hopefully there's a shift in youth today that being cool means a different thing, is a more positive thing, and less bullying around not being quote unquote cool or this or fitting in with the herd. So again, I think coming down to confidence on your path, defining what is cool, I guess, being smart, it should be cool. Being kind should be cool. Bullying is not cool. And I think, if more youth kind of had that mentality, I think we'd be in a better place.
I agree. I agree, Bill. I agree. What are your thoughts on that type of bullying, like with regards to, I've heard people say, oh, this colonialism, or like, don't go to other places to figure out a problem if you can't figure out that problem yourself within your own home. Kind of like, traveling. So like, and I imagine that you've probably faced some sort of those disagreements. Oh, like, why are you going to Africa, or these things? And I've heard that a lot, with people like, where do you get off, wanting to go to over here to help, or this to that, and when, certain scenarios maybe not happening in back home in Australia or in Canada or in the US or wherever. What are your thoughts on this perspective? I'm super curious because I imagine, facing maybe some people that have that perspective as well.
Yeah. There's a lot of people working in this sector. The sector is called international development, and working in communities that you could add value and develop them and improve them. And most people have very good intentions, but some people are misguided on their approach. And I think you have to be careful, because these are sensitive, vulnerable communities as well. And so,
Right.
yes, it could be very imperialistic and colonial to go in saying, I know what's best for you, do this, do that. That's not that's not the right approach. You have to localize and you have to be invited. So we only work in communities and countries, literally, that the government says, we have a strategy and we would like to invite you, and we want you to support this specific thing in the strategy with these very clear boundaries. And the nutrients, we want you to put this much iron in, this much zinc, so to speak, and we want you to work in these types of village. So we're not going in there telling the government what they should do or people what they should eat. That message is come and owned by the government for their people in those communities. We're coming in as a supporting mechanism. The day the government says, thank you very much, Sanku, thank you very much, Felix, we don't need you anymore. Cool, we're gone. And we're building a local team. We have 100 staff. 98% of them, 98 of our staff are East African locals. All our directors, all our senior managers. It's a local team producing local nutrients for local millers, for local people. And so I think the more that we localize, and I would like in the next couple of years to build my entire company to be all 100% East African, and I'll move to the board, right? And I think that exit strategy should exist with anybody going with good intentions from the global north to the global south. There should be an exit strategy.
I love it. And what I really love that you just mentioned was like really thinking global but acting local.
Right.
And it's really beautiful because we can all do that on a global standard. We can really all think on a global infrastructure, and we can do our part locally so that we're all benefiting in the benevolence that's available to us all. and I think it's fascinating that, you've had this awareness or this curiosity uh from for a long period of time. And I imagine I mean, I imagine it's for a long period of time that you've just had this desire of wanting to think like this. Where does that come from? I know you mentioned that, the thought process of like, the children. I know you thought your business like acumen, like the bullying, maybe in school or something like, but like, does it come from something deeper? Like, where does this thought process of making a bigger decision than yourself and doing what's best, where does this come from, brother?
I think it's in my DNA from an early age and from my parents. So my parents are of the 60s generation, right? Summer of Love, San Francisco, Berkeley, all that. They were there. Call them hippies, call them radicals, call them change makers, but they were fighting a system that they thought was unjust and corrupt. They were fighting and protesting against the Vietnam War, specifically against napalm being dropped on innocent kids. Like that, those images were horrific, and they were in the streets protesting. They were part of a radical community trying to end the Vietnam War and get out of Southeast Asia and really be vocal about that. And so they were, again, called the radicals or change makers, freedom fighters. They were part of that community, and they hung out with the Black Panthers. They moved to North Africa. Eventually, they settled and they left America because of the politics, and they settled in a small island called Ibiza, Spain, which is quite famous now for parties. But back then, it was
I used to
dirt
live
roads.
there.
I was born there, born and raised in Ibiza, and part of, again, a community of artists and radicals and expats and fugitives that all settled on this island across the 60s and 70s and into the 80s. And that's where I grew up, and part of that community of if you see something that's not right, you speak up. Again, that goes back to what I hope to instill in my children, that confidence that you can stand up against power. Power doesn't mean that it's right. And my mother and my father stood up against the American government at the time that was fighting an unjust war and murdering people all the way in Southeast Asia. And so, yes, that message and that confidence that they instilled in me has given me the platform to step up and disrupt a broken food system in East Africa that is literally causing millions of people to have poor health and hundreds, if not thousands, of people dying every single day. So I hope I instill that in my children. I hope more people instill that in their children as well, is to have the confidence to make change. And I think it comes down to, this is good, and I'm standing up to ensure that that is good, and having that confidence and belief that is right, and that you can do that, and you have the right to speak to power.
I love it, bro. And I love the fact that you bring this artistic expression of what I really call home. Ibiza is home. Ibiza is our artistic home of that brilliance and that wisdom that connects us to something so divine and so intelligent. And it allows that community and that expression of complete freedom to build something that is way more profound than just ourselves. And it's amazing to like discover this about you live, because Ibiza changed my life as well. Like living there, I lived in Beniras, on the north of the island, and it really allowed, whether it was with the drummers or the dancers or the artists, like everyone is really an artist on that island and really doing their best to serve one another. And I think that, you know it's beautiful that your parents have instilled this in you by their actions versus just talking about it and complaining about it or hoping someone else would do it for them. And so it's interesting because I do find that a lot of us Ibisenkos, I know you're I would say you're an Ibisenko. I'm just like, it's part of the spirit, But the focal point really being, and it's so fascinating. I literally received a call from a friend that lives in Ibiza this morning, and we're talking now about this. It's so funny.
right, right.
But the point is, yeah, like it's what a synchronicity, right? And which also he's doing a regenerative farm over there. He's really built a huge community. But the point that I'm trying to say or saying is that it's amazing that that island continues to nurture and support our creativity and then
Mhm.
allow us to go out into the world and really create even more of that impact and growth and your parents going there attracting there growing you like raising you there so that you can really stand on those on their shoulders and I believe that we have to support each other. We have to move towards that as a team and I'm excited to discover more of what you're gonna do in Africa. And I'm curious, because like I know some people that have a lot of land in Zambia. I know, if you need land or something, like I'd love to know on like what are or if anybody can like if you're open to sharing what your needs are in terms of whether it's investors or land or partners or anything like this so that when we do air this officially because right now although we are streaming live uh so we can send this out to people and say hey like this is what Sanku needs and this is what they're looking for and how can we help help you grow. What are your needs, brother?
Well, again, if this is a massive problem, so we have to scale and we have to scale pretty quick to address this problem. And that takes money, right? And you got to talk about that. What we're building, and this is the analogy, what we're building is a really big rocket to go faster, to go further, and to solve this problem eventually. But that rocket takes fuel to get to that point. And that point is solving malnutrition and doing it sustainably, and being break even as well, and not needing philanthropy. But we have to get to a certain size and a certain scale where costs are reduced and we can break even. So fundraising is always top of my mind to get more people inspired, to get more people understanding what this problem is and understanding that it's a solvable problem and it's very cost effective. Again, cost of a cup of coffee, one family, nutritious food for an entire year. So it's tangible and it's within reason for most people. So funding will get us more machines, get us more countries, get us ultimately more people reached and save lives.
Which I think is an investment, by the way. I just want to, I don't mean to interrupt, but I do want to interrupt for a reason because I do think that this is one of the fundamental investments. Because if we invest in the infrastructure of people and food sovereignty, we actually invest into the development of abundance and prosperity. And as a result, those people are healthy or nurtured. They create, nutrition security which then creates their a vitality that ultimately gives them the opportunity to create independence within themselves so that they can go out there, fulfill their passions, devote their energy to their truth. And so it really it all comes together. And I believe the greatest wealth is the wealth of the people. So I think is the greatest investment, by the way. I'm just saying, but anyways, please.
But Eric, you're spot on because they've done a study, and so for every $1 invested in fortification, what we do, there's a $27 return for the country. Less people are sick. There's less stress on the health system. There's less absenteeism in jobs. There's smarter people doing better careers, developing into engineers, building that country, developing that country, less stress on the GDP. So that's the $27 return on every $1 of fortification, which means improved health, starting with kids all the way up through their life. So this is an investment in not only food fortification and not only in health, but in the future of these countries. And so your $1 has a big payback as far as a social payback for that country.
I love it. And that's how we ultimately uh, end up developing these nations, anyways, because then as a result, the wealth becomes the people. Like, it's interesting. You can go to any country or you can like look at, where you're around in any environment. You look around and you look at the people and you're like, oh, wow, this is, you know, the people look really healthy. This looks like a great place. And then you can look at somewhere else and look at people that they're unhealthy and you're like, and you look around and you're like, oh, this place doesn't look. So it's interesting how if we just focus on developing and supporting and nurturing the wealth within the people and taking care of people and taking care of each other as a community, that all of a sudden we can actually get rid of the war and separate and ego bullshit pride and create actual spirit, purpose, opportunity, and coming together. And I just really, bro, like I'm so grateful that we got connected. I'm so grateful that what you're doing, you're doing. And I'm so excited to serve and support together on this mission. You know, that I know that we're here to do bigger and greater and more fundamental things for a greater whole. And the fact that we're both from Ibiza, I mean, you're again born there. I used to live there. It just makes me excited because I know the roots that you're coming from. You know what I mean? So it's
I
this.
grew up on Benny Beach. I've been jumping off that rock since I could walk. And my mother still
Wow.
lives. My mother lives right there on the Port Sax Road, and so that the part of the island. I grew up and went to school in the Morno Valley school, the famous school, and grew up in Santa Gertrudis. That red earth is in my blood. That is my island, and I will
Yeah.
move back there one day. My kids will grow up part of their life there for sure. Get back at least twice a year, even if it's for a weekend passing through to see my mom. Love it.
Where does your mom live in Santa Gertrudis or in Beniras still?
He's on. So if you go to San Juan, but take a left down the Portinax Road before Chukla, there's a turnoff. So she's
Yeah.
right down there. She's 10 minutes from San Juan.
Amazing. Amazing. Wow. Yeah, dude, I would love I always liked swimming out to what what they call King's Rock, out on Beniras Beach, right out to the main rock. I would swim out there. People thought I was crazy, and I would swim back, and it was amazing.
Yeah, for people who are listening, that rock is probably, I don't know, 300, 400, maybe half a kilometer out there. So Eric, big props. You should be in the Olympics.
Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing. And it was like sometimes it was cold. I would do it because you get into that state of that awareness and that home. And it's like there's something coming through us that it just gives us uh so much wisdom. And you get on that rock and it's like a balanced rock, same coming out that's like above, that's below.
Yeah,
It's a really special place. And so,
imagine.
bro, dude, I'm so grateful that bro, that we brought this up. Dude, so how, if people want to give, if they want to serve, if they want to support, if they want to find out more information about Sanku, they want to help in any way, where do they reach out to you? How can they lend an extra hand, or where they can just connect with you even?
Yeah, the easiest thing is through our website. We have contact phone numbers and emails there, but our website is www.sanku.com. That's spelled Sanku. And so there you have all the information on what we do. You can sign up and get our quarterly newsletter. Reach out to me. I'm always happy to have a one-on-one chat as well. Part of my responsibility is sharing this story and getting more people involved, whether you're just to learn or to fund. For me, it's about getting the message out. So reach out to us. We'd love to hear from you.
Amazing, bro. And other than going to Ibiza, what would be the last thing that you would do if you had, or things that you would do if you had 3 days left to live?
Hmm. Well, I'd spend every one of those with my beautiful wife and my two kids for sure. And we'd want to be doing something outside of the house, and we'd want to be somewhere beautiful. Probably sitting on the beach of Beniras, having a paella and a nice cold beer.
I love it. At Elements.
Exactly, exactly. Ignore element at elements.
Yeah, yeah. Enjoy the elements at Elements.
Yeah,
Bro, what an amazing and beautiful small world, man. I'm really grateful for your time, your energy, your presence, and if again, there's anything that I can do to support moving forward, I'm always here for you, bro.
Eric, you've already been a massive support. Thank you for this platform, and really great to like literally connect with you, and hopefully this is not the last time we speak.
Big love to you. Don't go anywhere. Just give 1 second.